The conversation began, as most disasters do, with something small. A Friday night text from Lou that read, "We need a vacation. Somewhere warm." I could almost hear their voice, calm, steady, the exact opposite of how I felt after the week I'd had. My job had been chewing me up and spitting me out, and Lou knew it. But when I read those words, my brain didn't think warm. It thought big, grand, monumental. I called them back immediately, pacing around my tiny apartment like a caffeinated squirrel. "What do you think about South America?" I blurted. "I've been dying to see Torres del Paine. Imagine hiking through those jagged mountains and glacial lakes. Or, oh my God, what if we did Peru? Machu Picchu, the salt flats." "Slow down," Lou laughed. "I was thinking, I don't know, Aruba? Jamaica? Maybe just lying on a beach somewhere?" I stopped pacing. "A beach? A warm beach," they clarified, as though that made it better. I sank onto my couch, already feeling the friction. Lou wanted serenity. I wanted spectacle. Lou wanted the soft edges of a cocktail umbrella. I wanted something raw, untamed. The thought of spending a week sunbathing made me itchy. The thought of asking Lou to spend a week climbing mountains made me feel guilty. "Okay," I said carefully, trying not to sound disappointed. "But don't you think we could do something a little more adventurous?" "I think I've had enough adventure," Lou said, their voice suddenly quiet. "I just want a break." That threw me. Lou wasn't an adventure person. Sure, but they weren't the type to shy away from something new, either. There was something heavier in their tone, something I couldn't quite place. I wanted to ask, but instead, I mumbled something about looking into options and hung up. Over the next few days, we volleyed links back and forth like two travel agents locked in a passive-aggressive duel. Lou sent me glossy photos of overwater bungalows and resorts where everything looked sanitized to the point of sterility. I countered with itineraries for national parks, road trips, and backpacking routes. "I'm not saying no to nature," Lou said during one of our calls, "but I want to enjoy it from a distance, like with a fruity drink." "And I'm not saying no to drinks," I countered. "I just want to earn them." The argument spilled into our usual rhythm of conversations, coloring everything in subtle shades of frustration. The thing was, it wasn't really about the trip. Not entirely. Lou had always been the grounding force in our friendship. Steady, calm, practical. I was the dreamer, the one who wanted to see and do everything, who sometimes got carried away. We balanced each other, usually. But this time, the balance felt off. The breaking point came one night when we were video chatting. Lou was sitting on their bed, laptop propped on a pillow, their face half lit by the screen. "Let me ask you something," they said. "Why do you even want to go on a trip with me?" I frowned, caught off guard. "What kind of question is that?" Lou sighed, running a hand through their hair. "Because it sounds like what you really want is to cross stuff off your bucket list. And that's fine. But maybe you don't need me for that." "That's not fair," I said, bristling. "I want to go with you. I thought this was supposed to be something we do together." "Yeah, but what does together mean? You dragging me up a mountain?" I stared at them, trying to find the words to explain the knot in my chest. "It's not about dragging you anywhere," I said finally. I want us to do something that feels unforgettable. Like, years from now, I want to look back and say, we did that. Don't you?" Lou looked away for a moment, and when they spoke, their voice was soft. "What I'll remember is whether I felt happy. And I don't think I'm going to feel happy on a death march." I laughed, but it was hollow. "It's not a death march. Feels like one." The call ended not long after that, and I sat there, staring at the blank screen, wondering if Lou was right. Did I want this for us? Or was I just trying to chase my own idea of what a vacation should be? The next day, I decided to push pause on the planning. I texted Lou and suggested we meet up instead, just to talk. They agreed, and we found ourselves sitting in the corner of a coffee shop, the hum of espresso machines filling the awkward silence between us. "I was a jerk," I said finally, breaking the ice. "I've been so caught up in my head about this trip that I didn't stop to think about what you need." "I'm sorry." Lou shook their head, a small smile tugging at their lips. "You weren't a jerk. You're just you, and I get it. You've always wanted to see the world. I just don't have it in me right now. Why? I asked gently. What's going on? They hesitated, then said, I've just been feeling off. Work's been a nightmare. My mom's been calling me every day with drama. I feel like I'm running on fumes. That's why I wanted the beach. I don't want to do anything. I just want to feel okay for a little while. It was like the last puzzle piece sliding into place. Suddenly, it wasn't about beaches versus mountains anymore. It was about what Lou needed, what they'd been trying to tell me this whole time. Okay, I said. Let's go to the beach. Lou's eyes widened. Really? Really, I said. But only if you promise we'll drink something ridiculous out of a coconut. They laughed, relief washing over their face. Deal. We ended up booking a trip to the Seychelles, a small island, far from everything, with white sand beaches and hiking trails that were more leisurely stroll than death march. Lou got their escape. I got my sense of wonder. And somewhere between snorkeling in clear blue waters and sharing long conversations under the stars, we found exactly what we both needed, each other. Looking back, I still wonder if I gave up too easily, if I should have pushed for something bigger, bolder. But then I remember the way Lou's face lit up when they saw the ocean for the first time, and I think, maybe this was big enough. AITA? One day, I reached into the silverware drawer to grab a fork and found nothing, not a single one. I stood there for a moment, staring into the void of the drawer as if more forks might materialize if I glared hard enough. They didn't. What they did do was remind me, once again, that living with my roommate Kyle was like being trapped in a surrealist painting. Kyle. I yelled toward his room. No answer. Classic Kyle. The fork thing wasn't new. Kyle treated our apartment like it was an all-you-can-eat buffet with built-in maid service. His idea of cleaning up was moving messes to new locations. Half-empty soda cans would migrate from the coffee table to his room, dirty socks would go from the couch to the kitchen floor, and, most mysteriously, silverware would vanish entirely. But this was a new low. I decided to investigate. I opened his bedroom door cautiously, like a cop in a bad procedural. The smell hit me first, a combination of gym socks, old takeout, and what I could only describe as unwashed ambition. Then I saw them. The forks. They were everywhere. On his nightstand, stuck between couch cushions, even balancing precariously on his computer desk, still crusty with some unidentifiable sauce. I counted 8 in total. 8 forks. I didn't even know we owned that many forks. Kyle. I yelled again, louder this time. What? He shouted back from the bathroom. I stormed over and banged on the door. Why are all the forks in your room? There was a pause. Then, in the most nonchalant voice imaginable, he said, Oh, yeah, I meant to bring those out. Meant to. The words sent a shiver down my spine. That night, I gathered the forks, washed them, and put them back in the drawer. I told myself it wasn't worth a confrontation. Kyle wasn't malicious. He was just Kyle. Besides, maybe I was being too uptight. But that was before the soup incident. A week later, I came home late to find Kyle sitting on the couch, shirtless, eating soup out of the largest mixing bowl we owned. Not a regular-sized bowl, a mixing bowl. He was using one of the newly liberated forks to stab at the floating chunks of vegetables, splashing broth everywhere like a toddler with a water gun. I stood there in stunned silence as he looked up, noodles dangling from his mouth. Hey, he said, as if this was a normal way to greet someone. Why are you eating soup with a fork? I asked, genuinely baffled. Didn't feel like washing a spoon, he said, shrugging. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the casualness of his reply. Maybe it was the broth soaking into the couch cushions. Maybe it was the fact that this man, this grown adult, had decided washing one spoon was a bridge too far. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to take it anymore. That's when I made the decision. I would do nothing. Literally nothing. No more cleaning up after Kyle. No more washing his dishes, taking out the trash, or rescuing the forks from his lair. If he wanted to live like a goblin, fine. But he'd have to deal with the consequences. It was a bold strategy, and it backfired almost immediately. By the end of the week, the kitchen looked like the aftermath of a food fight at an all-night diner. There were cereal bowls with milk crusted to the sides, empty ramen packets scattered across the counter, and a mysterious puddle under the fridge that smelled faintly of soy sauce and despair. The trash can was so full that Kyle had started building a secondary trash pile next to it, which he affectionately referred to as Trash Mountain. I tried to stay strong, but then he crossed the line. I came home one night to find him playing video games with two of his friends. They were sitting on the couch, eating pizza straight out of the box. No plates, no napkins, just greasy hands and greasy grins. As I walked past, I noticed the empty pizza boxes from last week were still on the coffee table. "Oh, hey, dude," Kyle said, smiling like nothing was wrong. "You're cool if we use the rest of your paper towels, right? Ran out of napkins." I stared at him, my eye twitching. He didn't even notice. The next day, I unleashed my master plan. I bought a lockbox. I stuffed it with my forks, my spoons, my bowls, and even my favorite coffee mug. I didn't just hide my food. I locked it up like it was gold bullion. If Kyle wanted to live like a feral animal, he could do it without dragging me into the mess. When he noticed, he didn't even ask me about it. Instead, he retaliated in the weirdest way possible. He bought a mini grill. Not a George Foreman or something practical. This was a campfire-style grill that he set up on the balcony. He used it to make burgers, bacon, even pancakes. I had to admit, it was kind of impressive, but also deeply annoying because he never cleaned it. One day, I found a raccoon on our balcony, pawing at a half-eaten burger he'd left out. When I told him about it, he just laughed and said, "Oh, nice. Free entertainment." I was at my wit's end. The apartment was devolving into chaos. The forks were safe, but at what cost? I started fantasizing about just moving out in the middle of the night. But then, Kyle did something I never expected. He cleaned. I came home to find the dishes washed, the trash taken out, and the couch wiped down. Even Trash Mountain was gone. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. But then I saw Kyle standing there with a mop, looking genuinely sheepish. "Hey," he said. I realized I've been kind of a bad roommate. Sorry about that." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "What brought this on?" He scratched the back of his neck. I tripped over the trash pile and dropped my phone in the soy sauce puddle. Figured it was time to, fix things. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was something. We sat down, talked things out, and even came up with a cleaning schedule. It's been a month, and so far, he's actually sticking to it. I even let the forks come out of the lockbox. Still, every time I see him eating soup, I make sure to double-check what utensil he's using. My roommate Ethan had a secret. I knew it from the moment I moved in. He wasn't obvious about it. No sketchy calls or odd comings and goings. But there was a tension around him, a guardedness, like he was constantly walking on eggshells in his own apartment. He kept weird hours and was always locking his bedroom door, even when he just ran down the hall to the bathroom. One night, about 3 months into our lease, I came home late from a work event to find Ethan sitting in the dark living room, headphones on, hunched over his laptop. I startled him when I walked in, and he slammed the lid shut like he'd been caught doing something illegal. I laughed it off, but the look on his face, wide-eyed and pale, stuck with me. What was he hiding? Now, I'm not usually the prying type, but there was something about Ethan's secret that itched. Like it was this invisible thread connecting us, and I couldn't help but tug on it. I started paying more attention to him, noticing little things. The way he avoided letting me see his phone screen, the cryptic text that made him frown, the way he'd glance nervously at the front door like someone might burst through at any moment. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it wasn't my business. But then the packages started showing up. At first, it was just 1 or 2, nondescript brown boxes addressed to Ethan. He'd scoop them up and take them to his room without a word. Then it became a steady stream, 2, 3, sometimes 4 packages a week. They were all different shapes and sizes, and none of them had any branding. Curiosity gnawed at me. Was he running some kind of illegal operation? Stockpiling supplies for an apocalypse? Hiding stolen goods? One afternoon, when Ethan was out, a package arrived. It was big, about the size of a microwave, and heavier than it looked. I carried it into the apartment, stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, and then I did the unthinkable. I opened it. Inside was the toaster. A plain, two-slice toaster. I blinked, baffled, and checked the shipping label. It was addressed to Ethan. All right. Why would anyone order a single toaster, let alone enough to fill a warehouse? I repackaged it, careful to cover my tracks, but now my mind was spinning. This was even stranger than I'd imagined. By the time Ethan came home, I was convinced I'd stumbled onto something huge. He was jumpy, as usual, and barely said 2 words to me before retreating to his room with the box. I wanted to confront him right then and there, but I needed more proof. That's when I got the idea to stake out his room. The next night, after he went to bed, I stayed up and listened. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint hum and a metallic click-clink. It sounded like toasting? No, that couldn't be right. The noise continued every night for a week. Hum, click-clink, hum, click-clink. It was maddening. I had to know what he was doing. So one night, when Ethan went out to run errands, I picked the lock on his bedroom door. I know it was wrong. I know, but I was in too deep to stop now. What I found was staggering. Ethan's room was filled with toasters, dozens of them, stacked on shelves, lining the walls, piled in corners. They weren't plugged in. Most of them looked brand new, but the sheer number was overwhelming. On his desk was a notebook, open to a page covered in detailed diagrams of toasters. I flipped through it and found pages of schematics, notes about voltage and browning settings, even what looked like an attempt to design a toaster that ran on solar power. What in the world was he doing? I didn't have long to ponder because, of course, Ethan came home early. I barely had time to jump back into the living room before he walked in. He gave me a weird look, like he could sense something was off, but he didn't say anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the toasters. Was he trying to invent something? Was this some kind of elaborate art project? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, I confronted him. "Ethan," I said over coffee, "what's with all the toasters?" He froze, his mug halfway to his lips. "What are you talking about?" "Come on," I said. "I've seen them. You've got 100 toasters in your room. What's going on?" For a moment, I thought he was going to deny it, but then he sighed, set down his mug, and rubbed his temples. "Okay," he said. "You want the truth? Fine." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. I'm a competitive toaster reviewer." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "It's a niche community," he continued, "but it's growing. People rely on my reviews to decide what to buy. I test every toaster for efficiency, consistency, crumb management. It's serious work." He looked almost proud, but I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're telling me you hoard toasters to review them?" "It's not hoarding," he said, defensive. "It's a passion. I have a blog, a following. People respect my opinions. I've even been sent prototypes by major brands." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh, but another part of me was impressed. It was bizarre, yes, but also kind of brilliant. Ethan wasn't running some shady scheme. He was just a toaster nerd. "So, the midnight toasting?" I asked. "Field tests," he said simply. Since then, I've left him alone about it. The guy's harmless, even if he's a little weird. Sometimes I hear the hum and clink at night and wonder if maybe Ethan's onto something. After all, everyone deserves to have their thing, right? But AITA for prying in the first place? It started with a notebook. Not just any notebook, the notebook. A leather-bound journal with Clara's name embossed on the cover in gold letters. It had been her constant companion since she got it as a gift for her birthday last year. She said it was her life map, a mix of daily affirmations, sketches, goals, and whatever else spilled out of her mind. It was Clara's sacred object, the kind of thing that was off limits to everyone else, including me, her best friend. The problem was, Clara left it at my apartment one night after we'd been binge-watching true crime documentaries and eating too much takeout. She'd rushed out the next morning, muttering about being late for a meeting, and I only noticed the notebook sitting on my coffee table hours later. I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. I figured she was busy, so I sent her a text letting her know it was safe at my place. Then came the mistake. That evening, I sat down with a glass of wine, glancing at the notebook again. It felt like it was staring back at me, daring me. I didn't mean to snoop. I swear I didn't. But the edge of a sketch caught my eye when I moved it to grab the remote. It was a drawing of a tree, sprawling and intricate, with tiny initials carved into the trunk. My initials. I froze. Why would Clara draw that? Was it symbolic? Nostalgic? I'd known her for years, but she never talked about anything deep like that. Curiosity burned in my chest. I convinced myself it wouldn't hurt to take a peek. Just a tiny one. I opened the notebook. The pages were filled with beautiful chaos. Doodles, quotes, to-do lists, poems, and snippets of conversations she'd overheard. But then, near the middle, I found a section labeled Truths. My heart sank when I read the first line. I can't stand the way she always interrupts me. Was she talking about me? The further I read, the more obvious it became. She was. There were entire paragraphs dissecting my flaws, written in vivid, brutal detail. She always has to make everything about herself, one line said. I wish she'd just listen for once instead of jumping in with some story about her own life. Another page read, sometimes I wonder if we'd even be friends if we met now. It felt like a slap in the face. The person I thought was my closest friend had been cataloging everything she disliked about me like I was some science experiment. I knew I shouldn't have read it. I knew the notebook was private, but now that I had, I couldn't unsee the words. Clara came by the next day to pick it up. She was her usual bubbly self, talking about some work drama and how she was craving pancakes. I tried to act normal, but it was hard to look her in the eye. Thanks for keeping this safe, she said, clutching the notebook to her chest. I don't know what I'd do if I lost it. No problem, I said, my voice tight. I didn't touch it or anything. Her smile faltered. Why do you sound weird? I'm not weird, I said too quickly. You're weird. She tilted her head, studying me. Did you open it? My face betrayed me before I could even think of a lie. Clara's eyes widened in horror. Oh my God, you did, she said, taking a step back. You read it? Okay, yes, I admitted, throwing up my hands. But you left it here, and there was a drawing of my initials. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to leave it alone, she snapped. That's private, personal stuff. How could you invade my space like that? Maybe because your personal stuff is filled with insults about me? I shot back. Did you think I'd never find out how much you secretly hate me? She winced, but her anger didn't waver. I don't hate you, she said through gritted teeth. That's not what it's about. Then what is it about, Clara? I demanded. Because it sure feels like you've been keeping some kind of scorecard on me. She hesitated, clutching the notebook tighter. It's just how I process things. Writing helps me sort through my thoughts. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. Could have fooled me, I said bitterly. Clara sighed, her shoulders sagging. You don't understand. Those aren't things I'd ever say to you. They're just fleeting thoughts. Frustrations. Everyone has them. You think I don't annoy you sometimes? But I don't write mine down for you to accidentally stumble across. That's not the same, I said, my voice cracking. You don't know what it's like to read something like that. To see all your worst fears about yourself confirmed in black and white. She softened, but only slightly. I get that it hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. But you hurt me too. You crossed a line. We stood there in silence, the air heavy between us. Finally, she said, I need some space. I nodded, biting back tears. Yeah, me too. It's been 2 weeks since that conversation, and we haven't spoken since. Part of me wonders if I should have just left the notebook untouched. Let ignorance be bliss. But another part of me feels like I deserve answers. Like I deserve to know what my best friend really thinks of me. The clock struck 3 in the morning, and the sound echoed through the cavernous station like a heartbeat. Leighton Metro, abandoned decades ago, was a liminal space where time felt irrelevant. Its tiled walls were cracked, revealing veins of rust, and the air hung heavy with the metallic tang of damp and decay. Anyone who found themselves here had made a mistake, or so the stories went. But Morgan hadn't found herself here by accident. She had come for answers. The legend of Leighton Metro was one of those urban myths that changed depending on who told it. Some said it was haunted. a place where the lost souls of commuters wandered forever. Others claimed it was a gateway, a portal to something vast and unknowable. For Morgan, it wasn't a place of superstition. It was the last known location of her brother, Liam, who vanished 6 months ago without a trace. Morgan clutched the photograph of Liam in one hand, her flashlight in the other. The beam cut through the oppressive darkness, illuminating fragments of the station. A broken bench, a graffiti-covered map of the city, a shattered clock frozen at 3:15. Her boots crunched against debris as she moved deeper, her breath visible in the cold air. "Liam!" she called out, her voice swallowed by the gloom. "Are you here?" The silence pressed against her like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. She took a few more steps, her pulse quickening. The photograph in her hand felt warm, almost unnaturally so, as though it pulsed faintly against her palm. Morgan frowned, holding it up to the flashlight. The picture, once crisp and clear, now seemed to ripple as though submerged in water. "What the hell?" she muttered. The ground beneath her shifted, and she stumbled. The flashlight clattered to the ground, its beams spinning wildly before stabilizing to illuminate a long-forgotten train track. Except this track wasn't like the others she'd passed. Its steel rails were pristine, gleaming as though freshly polished, and the air around it hummed faintly. Then she heard it, the low rumble of an approaching train. Morgan's stomach dropped. There hadn't been a functioning train in Leighton Metro for over 30 years. She snatched up the flashlight and backed away, her instinct screaming at her to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. The rumble grew louder, accompanied by a high-pitched whine, and a sudden rush of wind swept through the station, carrying with it the scent of ozone. The train emerged from the darkness, its sleek black body gleaming like obsidian. It was silent, its approach almost predatory, and it came to a halt with eerie precision. Its doors slid open, revealing an interior that glowed faintly with a strange, otherworldly light. Morgan's grip on the flashlight tightened. She should have turned and run. She should have left Leighton Metro the moment she set foot in it. But something, curiosity, desperation, or perhaps something more insidious, pulled her forward. She stepped onto the train. The doors hissed shut behind her, and the rumble of the engine resumed as the train glided into motion. Morgan turned to look out the window, expecting to see the familiar decrepitude of the station receding into the distance, but there was nothing outside. No walls, no tracks, just an infinite expanse of swirling black and silver, like the night sky folding in on itself. The interior of the train was unsettlingly sterile. The seats were upholstered in a smooth, unidentifiable material that shimmered faintly, and the air was devoid of any scent. As she moved down the aisle, Morgan noticed something odd about the passengers. They sat perfectly still, their faces obscured by veils of shadow. No one spoke, no one moved. "Excuse me," Morgan said, her voice trembling. "Do you know where this train is going?" One of the figures turned its head toward her. The shadows around its face dissolved, revealing features that were eerily familiar. It was Liam. "Liam!" she cried, rushing to his side. She reached out to touch him, but her hand passed through his form as though he were made of mist. "Morgan," he said, his voice faint and distorted, like a recording played backward. "You shouldn't have come." Tears pricked her eyes. "I had to. You disappeared. What happened to you? What is this place?" Liam's expression flickered, his face glitching like a corrupted video file. "The train doesn't go where you think it does. You need to leave." "I'm not leaving without you," Morgan insisted, her voice breaking. Liam's form wavered, and the other passengers began to stir, their movements jerky and unnatural. The lights inside the train flickered, casting their shadows against the walls in grotesque, elongated shapes. "Listen to me," Liam said, his tone urgent. "There's no time. When the conductor comes, don't look at him. No matter what you hear, no matter what he says, don't." A deafening chime cut him off, and the lights inside the train dimmed. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of burning metal. Morgan turned toward the front of the car, where a figure was emerging from the shadows. The conductor was tall and impossibly thin, his body clad in a uniform that seemed to ripple like liquid. His face was a blank canvas, featureless save for two hollow sockets where eyes should have been. He moved down the aisle with a deliberate, unsettling grace, his head tilting as if searching for something. Morgan squeezed her eyes shut, Liam's warning echoing in her mind. Don't look at him. But her curiosity itched at her, begging her to peek, to see what the conductor truly was. Tickets, the conductor intoned, his voice resonating with a metallic echo. All passengers must present their tickets. Morgan's hands trembled as she felt in her pockets, finding nothing. The passengers around her produced slips of paper, handing them to the conductor, who inspected each one with those empty sockets before moving on. When he reached her, he paused. The air around him grew colder, and she could feel his gaze piercing her, despite his lack of eyes. Your ticket, he demanded. I don't have one, she stammered, her eyes still shut. Silence followed, stretching into an eternity. Then, the conductor spoke again, his voice softer but infinitely more chilling. You shouldn't be here. The train jolted violently, and Morgan felt herself falling, her body weightless as though plummeting through endless space. The sound of the conductor's voice and the hum of the train faded into nothingness. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the cold tiles of Leighton Metro, the flashlight still clutched in her hand. The photograph of Liam lay beside her, its surface now blank. She staggered to her feet, her heart pounding. The station was as silent and lifeless as when she'd entered, but she knew she wasn't alone. In the distance, faint and haunting, she could hear the rumble of a train. I've always believed there are two types of secrets, the kind that protect you and the kind that eat you alive. My mistake was not realizing which kind my brother, Nate, was keeping. It started with the garage door. I was staying with Nate for a few months while I job hunted in the city, crashing in his guest room and occasionally raiding his fridge. It was a good setup. Nate and I had always gotten along, even as kids. He was the golden boy, charming, talented, with the kind of natural charisma that made people trust him instantly. Me? I was the one who knew where all the bodies were buried. One morning, I came downstairs and noticed the garage door was open. That was weird, because Nate was meticulous about locking up. The man had a system for everything. Chores, bills, even his collection of vintage records. I closed the door, shrugged it off, and went about my day. But then it happened again, and again. By the fourth time, I decided to ask him about it. Hey Nate, what's up with the garage door? You keep leaving it open. He looked up from his laptop, his expression too casual. Huh, must have forgotten. You forgot 4 times? I raised an eyebrow. That's not like you. Maybe I'm losing my touch, he said, smirking. I let it go, but the next morning, I got up early and caught him in the act. He was standing in the garage, staring at something in the corner. A heavy, tarp-covered shape I hadn't noticed before. When he saw me, he jumped like a guilty teenager caught sneaking out. What are you doing? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Nothing, he said quickly, stepping in front of the tarp. Just checking the tools. Needed a wrench. At 7 in the morning? It's called being productive, he snapped, brushing past me. I knew he was lying, but I didn't press. Nate could be touchy when cornered, and I figured if it was important, he'd tell me eventually. But as the days went on, he got weirder. Distracted. Jumpy. He started taking late-night drives, coming home with the same vague excuse every time. Just needed some air. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While Nate was out, I went into the garage and lifted the tarp. Underneath was an old, rusted safe. It looked ancient, the kind of thing you'd see in a black and white detective movie. There were scratches around the lock, like someone had been trying to force it open. My pulse quickened. What the hell was Nate hiding? I confronted him that night. All right, spill, I said as he walked through the door. What's in the safe? His face went pale. You went through my stuff? It's in the garage, Nate. Not exactly Fort Knox. What's going on? Nothing you need to worry about, he said, brushing past me. That's not an answer. Drop it, okay? No, I said, stepping in front of him. You're acting like a paranoid lunatic, and it's freaking me out. Just tell me what's in the damn safe. He glared at me, his jaw tight. For a second, I thought he was going to shove past me, but then he sighed and rubbed his face. It's complicated. Try me. He hesitated, then finally said, I found it. Found it where? In a storage locker. It was part of an estate auction I went to last month. Okay, I said slowly. And what's in it? I don't know. You bought a safe without knowing what's inside? I thought it'd be cool, he said defensively, like something out of a treasure hunt. I figured I could crack it open and find, I don't know, cash, jewelry, something valuable. Did you find anything? He hesitated again, his eyes darting away. Not yet. I narrowed my eyes. You're lying. He didn't respond, which was answer enough. Nate, I said, my voice low. What's in the safe? He looked at me, his face tight with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Shame? Both? I don't know how to explain it, he said finally. It's unsettling. Unsettling how? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing there with more questions than I'd started with. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying the look on Nate's face, the way his hands had trembled when I'd confronted him. Finally, I decided I couldn't let it go. I grabbed a flashlight and went back to the garage. The safe was still there, heavy and immovable. I crouched down and inspected the scratches around the lock, my heart racing. What could possibly be inside that was so bad Nate couldn't even talk about it? As I ran my hand over the surface, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small, faint inscription near the bottom. It read, "Do not open." A chill ran down my spine. The next morning, I told Nate we needed to get rid of it. This thing is messing with your head, I said. Whatever's in there, it's not worth losing sleep over. He shook his head. I can't just throw it away. What if there's something important inside? Or something dangerous, I countered. He didn't respond, just stared at the safe like it was daring him to defy it. That was 2 weeks ago. The safe is still in the garage, and Nate is still obsessing over it. I've tried everything. Reasoning, pleading, even threatening to call someone to haul it away. But he won't listen. I feel like I've lost him to whatever's inside that damn box. So, AITA for trying to intervene? Should I have just let him deal with it on his own, even if it destroys him? Or was I right to say something? Because now, late at night, I swear I hear faint whispers coming from the garage, and I don't know if it's just my imagination, or if the safe is trying to tell me something, too. Look, before you judge me, let me just say, I didn't know the goat would climb onto the roof. I mean, who expects that? Goats don't come with instruction manuals, okay? So, yeah, maybe I made a few executive decisions, but in my defense, I genuinely thought I was solving the problem. Instead, I accidentally ruined my sister's baby shower. It started out as a perfectly normal Sunday morning. My sister Katie, 6 months pregnant and glowing like a lamp from one of those Pinterest nurseries, had entrusted me with one task: transport the desserts from her friend's bakery to her house. That's it. No organizing, no decorating, just desserts. Don't overthink it, Katie said. Just pick them up and bring them here. No detours. Which, in hindsight, feels a little condescending. Like, I can't handle a box of cupcakes? But whatever. I was determined to prove her wrong. I picked up the desserts without a hitch. Cupcakes, a custom lemon tart with "Welcome Baby Ava" piped in delicate pink icing, and some frou-frou macarons in pastel colors. They were perfect. Fragile, but perfect. I placed them carefully in the back seat of my car, double-checked that they were stable, and was about to drive straight to Katie's house when my phone buzzed. It was my landlord. "Hey," he said, "can you check on the goat?" "Oh, right. The goat. See, I live in a duplex, and my landlord's kid got a goat for some inexplicable reason. His name is Kevin, the goat, not the landlord, and he's supposed to stay in the backyard. Except Kevin has this habit of escaping. And by habit, I mean he's practically a goat Houdini. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, the landlord was out of town and needed me to make sure Kevin hadn't climbed into traffic again. I debated ignoring the text, but the idea of Kevin wreaking havoc weighed on me. Besides, Katie wouldn't even notice if I was 5 minutes late. I could swing by, check on Kevin, and be a hero to my landlord and my sister. Win-win. When I got to the duplex, Kevin was, indeed, not in the yard. Of course he wasn't. After a few minutes of searching, I found him munching on someone's azaleas 2 houses down. "Come on, Kevin," I muttered, grabbing his rope leash. He bleated at me indignantly but followed. Crisis averted. Or so I thought. The moment we got back to my car, Kevin locked eyes with the box of desserts in the back seat like they owed him money. Before I could react, he lunged forward and jammed his stupid goat face right up to the window. "No," I shouted, pulling him back. "Those are not for you." That's when Kevin decided to climb onto the hood of my car. I froze. I didn't even know goats could climb cars. It's not something you prepare for. But there he was, hooves scratching my paint job, staring at me like, "What are you going to do about it?" I tried coaxing him down, but Kevin wasn't having it. He was king of the mountain now, and I was just a peasant. That's when the neighbor came out. "Is that your goat?" she asked, holding a mug of coffee and looking far too amused. "Nope," I said, yanking at the leash. "Just babysitting." She smirked. "Looks like he's babysitting you." Not helpful. At this point, I was sweating. The cupcakes were fine, for now, but time was ticking and Katie was probably wondering where I was. I finally managed to lure Kevin off the car with a granola bar I found in my bag, but the minute his hooves hit the ground, he bolted. Straight into my open car door. "Kevin, no!" I shouted, scrambling after him. Too late. Kevin was in the back seat, with the desserts. I panicked. On one hand, I couldn't just yank him out without risking him stomping all over the cupcakes. On the other hand, I couldn't show up to Katie's baby shower with a goat in tow. I needed a plan. Fast. That's when I had my brilliant idea. I drive Kevin to the party. Hear me out. I figured he'd stay calm if I kept the car moving, and once I got to Katie's house, someone there could help me get him out without wrecking the desserts. I'd explain everything, and everyone would laugh about it later. Except, halfway there, Kevin decided to stick his head out the window like a dog. It was kind of cute, honestly, until he spotted another goat in someone's yard and started bleating so loudly I thought my eardrums would burst. Cars honked. People stared. One guy actually pulled out his phone to record us. When I finally pulled into Katie's driveway, Kevin had eaten 3 macarons and was trying to climb onto the lemon tart. I was so frazzled that I didn't even notice the entire party standing on the front lawn, staring at me. "What the hell is that?" Katie shrieked, pointing at Kevin, who was now chewing on a pink frosting rose. "It's a long story," I said, trying to sound casual. Katie stormed over, yanked open the car door, and gasped when she saw the ruined desserts. "You had one job," she yelled. "One. It's not my fault." I protested. "The goat." "I don't care about the goat," she snapped. "Why is it even here?" That's when Kevin, as if sensing the drama, leapt out of the car and straight onto a folding table full of presents. Wrapping paper flew everywhere. Katie's mother-in-law screamed. Someone's mimosa hit the grass. Kevin, unfazed, began nibbling on a ribbon. Chaos. Absolute chaos. I spent the rest of the party trying to make it up to Katie, but she was too busy trying to salvage what was left of the day. Kevin was eventually wrangled back into my car and returned to the duplex, where he immediately tried to eat my landlord's welcome mat. So, yeah, I ruined my sister's baby shower. But, in my defense, it's not like I invited Kevin to the party. AITA? I always imagined finding treasure would feel exhilarating. You know, chest of gold coins, a map with a big red X, maybe some dramatic orchestral music playing in the background. What I didn't imagine was finding it inside an old Polaroid camera at a flea market, tucked between 2 stalls selling knockoff sunglasses and scented candles. The camera wasn't even something I wanted. I was there with my girlfriend, Maddie, who loved vintage vibes, which basically meant dragging me through dusty aisles while she debated the aesthetic merits of chip faces. When I saw the Polaroid, I picked it up out of boredom and started fiddling with it, pressing random buttons like I knew what I was doing. That's when the back popped open, and out tumbled a wad of folded paper. "Hey, what's that?" Maddie asked, peering over my shoulder. "Probably an instruction manual," I said, already unfolding it. It wasn't. It was cash. Lots of cash. Crisp $100 bills, stacked together like a tiny, portable bank. My heart started racing. Who hides money in a camera? And why? Was this drug money? Mafia money? Ghost money? My brain spiraled as Maddie let out a tiny gasp. "Don't just stand there," she hissed. "Put it back before someone sees." But I couldn't stop staring. There had to be at least 10 grand in there. Maybe more. A treasure map didn't have to come with a red X. Sometimes it was a flea market and an old camera. After a hasty and slightly awkward negotiation, I bought the camera for $20. I shoved it in my bag, made some excuse about needing to leave before traffic got bad, and drove home as Maddie drilled me with questions. "What are you going to do with it? Should we call the police? What if someone's looking for it? What if someone saw us take it?" I told her we'd figure it out later, but deep down, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Spend it. At first, it was fun. Maddie and I went to a fancy restaurant where the food came on plates so big you needed GPS to find the meal. I paid off some overdue bills, bought Maddie that designer purse she'd been eyeing, and treated myself to noise-canceling headphones because the neighbor's dog was an aspiring opera singer. Life felt good. Great. Even. For about a week. The problem started when Maddie posted about the purse on Instagram. "Feeling spoiled," she captioned it, along with a photo of the bag artfully arranged with a latte and a half-eaten croissant. Within hours, her friends started commenting. "OMG, how'd Alex afford that?" one asked. "Did you win the lottery?" another joked. Maddie didn't say anything, but I could tell she loved the attention. A couple of days later, she posted again. This time a selfie of us at the fancy restaurant, celebrating something special, the caption read. And just like that, people started to notice. It wasn't long before my brother, Mike, called. "So, I heard you've come into some money," he said, his tone casual but probing. "Where'd you hear that?" I asked, playing dumb. "Doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is, I could really use some help. You know how tight things have been since the baby came." Mike wasn't wrong. He and his wife had been struggling. But before I could even respond, he added, "Just a couple grand. That's nothing for you now, right?" I tried to explain that it wasn't like that this wasn't a jackpot I'd earned or inherited. But he wasn't listening. "Come on, Alex. Family helps family. Or are you too busy buying Maddie purses to care?" That stung. I gave him $1,500 just to shut him up, hoping it would end there. It didn't. Word spread fast, like wildfire fueled by greed. My mom called next. "I don't want to bother you," she began, which is how she always starts when she's about to ask for something big. "But your dad's been talking about replacing the roof. You know how leaky it gets in the winter." My best friend, Luke, wasn't much subtler. "Hey, remember that trip we talked about taking to Vegas? This could be our chance, man," he said, grinning like a kid at Christmas. Even Maddie, who'd been by my side from the start, started dropping hints. "I was thinking," she said one night, scrolling through her phone, "we could upgrade the apartment. Maybe move into one of those new lofts downtown?" "With what money?" I asked, incredulous. She blinked at me like I'd said something stupid. "With the money, Alex. The money." That's when it hit me. No one saw this as our money. They saw it as their opportunity. My little windfall had turned me into a human ATM, and everyone had a withdrawal to make. The final straw came at a family dinner, where Mike decided to announce, loudly, that I'd been holding out on the rest of the family. "You know," he said, stabbing his fork into a piece of roast chicken, "Alex could have covered Mom and Dad's roof and my car loan if he wasn't busy splurging on himself." I gaped at him, stunned. "I already gave you money, Mike," I said. "How is that not enough?" "Because you have more," he shot back. "And instead of helping, you're hoarding it." "Hoarding it?" I laughed bitterly. "Do you even hear yourself? I've already spent half of it on other people. I didn't ask for this money. I found it. And now you're acting like it's your God-given right to keep it," he retorted. Typical. The table went silent. I looked around at my family, hoping for someone, anyone, to back me up. But my mom just sighed. My dad looked away, and Maddie stared at her plate. I left the dinner early, my stomach churning with anger and disbelief. This money had felt like a blessing, but now it was a curse. No one saw what I'd given, only what I hadn't. They all wanted more, more, more. Now, as I sit here, staring at the last $2,000 in my account, I can't help but wonder if I should have just left that stupid banana camera at the flea market. Or better yet, burned the cash the second I found it. I almost didn't take the job. The email was too formal, the parents too polished, the house too sterile looking on Google Maps. But my savings account was crying for help, and so was my fridge, whose only inhabitants were a lone ketchup packet and a can of flat soda. So I said yes. I thought, it's just one night. What could possibly go wrong? The house was exactly what I'd expected. Pristine, symmetrical, and cold. Like the architect had taken inspiration from a luxury spa and an operating room. Claire and Mark, yes, they introduced themselves like real estate agents, were waiting for me in the foyer. Claire was a tall blonde in a sheath dress, holding a glass of wine like it was her only source of joy. Mark was shorter, with the weary look of a man whose socks probably matched the napkins at dinner. "We're so glad you could step in," Claire said, her smile just a little too tight. "The boys are upstairs. Dinner is already taken care of, pizza and breadsticks. The cash is on the counter for when the delivery arrives." Mark nodded, clearly ready to leave. "We'll be back around 10. The boys should be in bed by 9. "Got it," I said, matching their professional tone. Babysitting wasn't my dream job, but I knew the drill. Smile, nod, don't let the kids set anything on fire. As soon as they left, I went upstairs to find Sam, 10, and Toby, 7, mid-sword fight with foam pool noodles. Toby greeted me with a battle cry and swung his noodle at my knees. Sam rolled his eyes, clearly the older, wiser sibling. "Pizza's coming soon," I said, dodging Toby's next attack. "You guys hungry?" "Starving," Sam said, dropping his noodle like a general calling a truce. Toby followed suit, and we made our way back downstairs. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. I paid the delivery guy, placed the pizza box and breadsticks on the counter, and handed the boys their plates. "2 slices each to start," I said. They dug in with the enthusiasm of wolves at a buffet. When they were settled, I grabbed a plate for myself. 2 slices, 1 breadstick. Nothing crazy. I sat at the table, half listening to Toby's tale about how he totally defeated a dragon in Minecraft while Sam tried to convince him that dragons weren't real. The boys finished, and after some light herding, I got them into their pajamas and upstairs for bed. By 9:30, the house was quiet. I was scrolling through Instagram on the couch when I heard a sound. A creak. Faint, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me pause. I glanced around the room. Nothing. Probably just the house settling, I told myself, though it didn't settle the goosebumps rising on my arms. A minute later, another creak, this time from the kitchen. My heart kicked up a notch. "It's fine," I thought, probably just the fridge or the wind or... Then came the faintest shuffle, like someone moving slowly, deliberately. My stomach clenched. I stood, grabbing one of the boys' pool noodles for protection. The kitchen was empty. The pizza box sat on the counter, innocent and untouched, except the lid was open. I'd closed it before bedtime, hadn't I? I walked closer, my grip tightening on the noodle. The pizza was there, minus the 2 slices I'd eaten and the boys' portions. But something was off. The breadsticks. There were 3 left earlier. Now there were 2. I froze. My mind raced through scenarios. Did one of the boys sneak downstairs? No, I would have heard them. Could the parents have come back early? No, they would have called out. Then who? Is something wrong? I nearly screamed. Claire was standing in the doorway, still in her dress, holding her wine glass. "I didn't hear you come in," I stammered, lowering the noodle. "We just got back," she said smoothly, stepping into the kitchen. "Did the boys go to bed on time?" "Yes, no problems," I said, my voice steadier now. "Everything went great." Her eyes flicked to the open pizza box, then back to me. "Did you eat?" "Just 2 slices," I said quickly. "I thought..." "That's not what we agreed to," she interrupted, her tone cold. "What?" I asked, confused. "You didn't say anything about..." "We didn't hire you to eat our food," she said, setting down her glass with a sharp clink. Her gaze was as icy as the wine she'd been nursing. Mark appeared behind her, his expression unreadable. We'll deduct it from your pay, he said simply. I blinked, my stomach doing a backflip. You're kidding, right? Do we look like we're kidding? Claire snapped, her voice slicing through the room. I stared at them, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, I managed. It was 2 slices. There's still pizza left. It's the principal, Mark said, as if that explained everything. I grabbed my bag and walked out without another word. As I stepped into the crisp night air, I realized my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from rage. The principal? What principal? That babysitters should survive on air and good intentions? When I got home, I texted Laura, "You owe me dinner." She replied instantly, "What happened?" I stared at the screen, debating how to summarize the weirdest night of my life. Finally, I just typed, "They're pizza thieves." Her response? "Told you the job was cursed." The night Louis collapsed, it was like the universe itself paused, waiting for me to make the wrong move. 1 minute, my scrappy little dachshund Mix was zipping around the living room like his usual deranged self, barking at the ceiling fan as if it owed him money. The next, he crumpled onto his side, legs twitching, a horrible choking sound escaping his throat. It was the kind of noise that stays in your chest long after it's gone. I froze for half a second before scooping him up and running out the door barefoot, barely remembering to grab my keys. My partner, Zoe, followed close behind, shouting, "What happened? Is he breathing?" I couldn't answer. I wasn't sure. At the emergency vet, everything blurred. Bright lights, hurried whispers, clipboards. None of it registered until the vet came out holding Louis's chart like it was a court summons. "It looks like he has a congenital heart defect," she said, her voice professional but kind. "It's been there since birth, but it's progressed. He's in heart failure. There's a surgery that could help, a valve replacement, but it's extremely complex and expensive. Without it, he has maybe a month, maybe 2. "I'm so sorry." I stared at her, the words heart failure and 2 months looping in my head like a broken record. Louis was only 4. He wasn't supposed to have an expiration date. "How much?" Zoe asked, her tone clipped. The vet named a figure that could have paid off my student loans twice over. I felt the air leave the room. Zoe let out a low whistle. "And what are the odds the surgery works?" she asked. The vet hesitated. "It's hard to say. The procedure has a decent success rate, but recovery is intensive, and there's always a chance of complications." Zoe thanked her and turned to me, her face already set in that rational, no-nonsense expression she wore when balancing the checkbook or explaining why we didn't need takeout for the 3rd time in a week. "Claire, we need to think this through." "What's there to think about?" I said, my voice cracking. "He needs the surgery. Does he?" Zoe crossed her arms. "Or do you need him to have the surgery? Because those are 2 different things." I glared at her. "Don't do this. Don't turn this into a logic problem. He's my dog." "Our dog," she corrected. "And I love him too, but we can't ignore the reality here. That surgery is a gamble. Even if it works, the recovery sounds miserable. He'll be in and out of the vet for months, and there's no guarantee he'll even make it through the first night. So what's your solution?" I snapped. "We just let him die?" "No," she said firmly. "But maybe we let him live the time he has left comfortably. No pain, no endless vet visits, no tubes and stitches. Just Louis being Louis for as long as he can." I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Comfortably? He's in heart failure, Zoe. How comfortable do you think he's going to be?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm just saying we need to think about what's fair to him, not just what we want." The vet cleared her throat from the doorway, clearly regretting her decision to step back into the room. "Take some time to talk it over," she said, retreating quickly. We drove home in silence, Louis curled up in the back seat, his breathing shallow but steady. Zoe's words echoed in my head. What's fair to him? But what did that even mean? Louis didn't understand odds or recovery times. He understood belly rubs and cheese slices and barking at the mailman. Wasn't it my job to give him more of that, no matter the cost? That night, Zoe and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, the tension between us thick enough to cut. Louis lay between us, his little chest rising and falling with every labored breath. "I know you're angry," Zoe said finally, her voice soft, "but I'm not trying to hurt you. I've seen what this kind of thing can do to a dog. When I was a kid, we put our dog Max through chemo. It was awful. He wasn't Max anymore. He was just tired and scared and in pain. I don't want that for Louie." "I don't either," I said quietly. "But this isn't chemo. It's a surgery. And if it works, he could have years left. He could be himself again." "And if it doesn't?" Zoe asked, her voice trembling. "What if it just makes his last days worse?" I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I spent the next few hours Googling everything I could find about valve replacement surgeries for dogs. I read success stories that made me hopeful and horror stories that made me question everything. By morning, I was more confused than ever. Zoe found me in the kitchen, staring blankly at a cup of coffee. "I made an appointment with another vet," she said, "for a second opinion, just to be sure." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. The second vet told us the same thing. The surgery was Louie's best chance, but it wasn't a guarantee. She added that some dogs did remarkably well during recovery, while others struggled. It was impossible to predict how Louie would respond. On the way home, Zoe finally broke the silence. "If we do this, we do it together," she said. "But promise me, Claire, if it gets to a point where he's suffering more than he's living, we let him go. We don't drag this out for our sake." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I promise." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. The night before, I stayed up with Louie, feeding him bits of chicken and scratching behind his ears. "You've got this, buddy," I whispered. "You're tougher than you look." The surgery went as well as it could have. Louie pulled through, though the first few days were rough. He hated the cone, the medications, the crate confinement. He glared at me like I was the source of all his misery. But little by little, he started to improve. Now, 2 months later, Louie's almost back to his old self. He still tires out more easily than before, but he's running and barking and stealing food off the counter like nothing ever happened. Zoe and I are closer than we've been in years, though I still catch her watching Louie with a cautious kind of hope. Did I make the right choice? Or was Zoe right to question me? I don't know. All I know is that Louie's tail is wagging again, and for now, that's enough. I wasn't trying to steal the watch. That's important to know from the start. It wasn't theft. It was borrowing, with intent to return. Except, now it's kind of smashed. My brother isn't speaking to me, and I'm wondering if I'm a terrible person. The watch in question isn't just any watch. It's a Rolex. Not one of those sleek, modern ones either. It's vintage, with this old-school gold face and a leather strap that's aged like a fine wine. It used to belong to my grandfather, who passed it down to my dad, who passed it down to my older brother, Leo. The heirloom handoff, as Leo calls it, happened at Christmas last year, and he's been insufferable about it ever since. Leo keeps the watch in a special case on his dresser. It's not even a fancy case, just a little black box with a foam insert, but he treats it like it's the Ark of the Covenant. He polishes it once a week, brags about how classic it is, and lectures me about respecting family history whenever I get too close to it. Now, to be fair, I've never exactly been the responsible sibling. Leo's the golden child, the straight-A student who landed a high-paying job straight out of college. I'm the screw-up, hopping between part-time gigs and living in an apartment where the water pressure is a suggestion, not a guarantee. So maybe he has a reason to doubt me. But it still stung when, after one too many beers at a family barbecue, he turned to me and said, "You'd probably pawn it for rent money." I laughed it off at the time, but the comment stuck with me. So, when my boss announced that our company was hosting a fancy charity gala and encouraged us to dress to impress, I decided I was going to prove Leo wrong. I'd show up looking sharp, be the picture of class and maturity, and absolutely crush it. And what better accessory to seal the deal than the family Rolex? The plan was simple. Leo was out of town for the weekend, visiting his girlfriend's family, so I stopped by his place to check on the house like he'd asked me to. The watch was right there in its little box, glinting under the light like it was begging to be borrowed. I told myself he'd never notice it was gone for one night. I'd wear it to the gala, dazzle everyone, and put it back before he got home. No harm, No foul. Except, of course, there was harm. And foul. So much foul. The evening started great. I showed up in a rented suit, the Rolex peeking out just enough to catch compliments. I felt unstoppable. Classy. Like someone who belonged in a room full of people sipping champagne and bidding thousands of dollars on abstract art. My boss even complimented the watch, saying, "Now that's a statement piece." I was on top of the world. Then came the incident. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to serve cocktails in a room with marble floors and zero carpet. One minute I was gesturing with my drink, trying to impress a potential client, and the next, I was slipping on someone's spilled martini like a cartoon character on a banana peel. I went down hard, my arms smashing into the floor with a sickening crack. When I looked down, the Rolex's glass face was shattered. The second hand was twitching like it was having a seizure, and a piece of the gold rim had chipped off. My heart sank faster than my body had. I scooped up the pieces, mumbling something about being fine, and bolted for the exit before anyone could see me cry. Back at my apartment, I Googled Rolex repair costs and nearly had a heart attack. It wasn't just expensive, it was astronomically expensive. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't even afford to look at the number on the screen without wanting to throw up. So, I did what any panicked, irresponsible person would do. I shoved the watch back in its box, broken and all, and put it back in Leo's room the next day. He called me 2 days later. "Did you touch my watch?" he asked, his voice tight. "What? No," I said, laughing nervously. "Why would I do that?" "It's broken, Mia," he snapped. "The glass is shattered, and there's a chip in the rim. What the hell happened?" I tried to lie again, but he cut me off. "Don't. Just don't. You're the only one who's been in the house." There was a long pause, and then he said, "I trusted you." "Leo, I started, but he hung up before I could finish. Now he won't answer my calls. My parents found out, and my mom's disappointed, which is somehow worse than if she were just mad. My dad told me I should apologize, but I don't know what to say. It's not like I can fix it, and even if I could, it wouldn't undo the damage to our relationship. Part of me feels like Leo's overreacting. It's a watch. A fancy one. Sure, but still just a thing. And it's not like I meant to break it. But another part of me knows I shouldn't have taken it in the first place. It wasn't mine to take, and I let my own insecurity cloud my judgment. I was halfway through reheating last night's pizza when my phone rang. A glance at the screen told me it was Rachel, my oldest friend. The kind of friend you don't hang up on, no matter what. She'd been there for my ugly breakup with Derek, for the time I bombed my first big presentation at work, for the flu that left me bedridden for a week. "Hey, what's up?" I said, putting the plate down. Her voice came through breathless, panicked. "You have to help me. Please. I'm stuck." "Stuck? Stuck where?" "At home. With Leo. I think I screwed up." Leo was her toddler, 2 years old and already a tornado of chaos. I could hear him wailing in the background like a tiny demon. "What happened?" I asked, grabbing my keys instinctively. "He got into the paint. Like, all the paint. My landlord's going to kill me. And there's peanut butter on the ceiling. Don't ask how, and I can't do this alone right now." It was the kind of crisis that would normally send me running out the door. But today, I hesitated. "Rachel, I'd love to help, but..." I trailed off, searching for the words. "But what?" she pressed, her voice sharp now. I inhaled. "I've had a rough week. Work's been a nightmare, and I was really looking forward to just having a night to myself." There was silence on the other end, not the stunned kind, or even the angry kind. This was the wounded silence of someone who didn't expect to be told no. "I see," she said finally. "Ratch, it's not that I don't want to help." "No, I get it," she interrupted, her voice brittle. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." And then she hung up. I stared at my phone, torn between guilt and frustration. Rachel wasn't the kind of person who asked for help lightly. She'd spent years being the strong one, the one who kept everyone else afloat. But she'd also called me at least 4 times in the last 2 weeks for one crisis or another. Last-minute babysitting, a flat tire, a broken showerhead she couldn't fix. And every time, I'd said yes. Not tonight. For a while. I sat there in silence, replaying the call in my head. Should I have gone? Was I being selfish? But then I looked around my apartment. The half-eaten pizza on the counter, the Netflix queue waiting patiently, the unopened book I'd been dying to start. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A night of peace, something I hadn't had in months. I convinced myself it was the right choice. Rachel would figure it out, just like she always did. Or so I thought. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of texts. Rachel, Leo finally went to sleep at midnight. Paint's mostly cleaned up. The ceiling? Not so much. Hope your night of rest was worth it. Mom, Rachel told me about last night. Are you okay? It's not like you to say no. Group chat. Can't believe Maddie left Rachel hanging like that. What happened to being best friends? The group chat one hit the hardest. Our tight-knit circle had always been ride or die for each other. But now, the chat felt less like a circle and more like a firing squad. By lunchtime, the guilt was unbearable. I called Rachel, half hoping she wouldn't pick up. She did. Hey, she said flatly. Hey, I wanted to check on you. And apologize, I started. For what? She said, her tone icy. For not coming over last night. I should've. No, she interrupted. You shouldn't have. I get it. You needed me time. That's fine. I just didn't realize that's where we're at now. Her words cut deeper than I expected. That's not fair, Rachel. You know I've been there for you. Every time you've needed me. And you couldn't do it one more time, she snapped. You know how hard things are for me right now. Leo's father is useless. The bills are piling up, and sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. But sure, your Netflix night was more important. I felt my defenses rising. This isn't about Netflix. It's about me needing a break before I burn out completely. I can't pour from an empty cup, Rachel. I never asked you to pour from an empty cup, she said quietly. I just asked for one night. One. Her words lingered long after the call ended. The day passed in a haze of second-guessing. Was I wrong to say no? Or was Rachel wrong to expect me to say yes? I thought about all the times I dropped everything for her, the way I'd built my identity around being the dependable friend. And then I thought about last night, sitting on my couch, feeling something close to relief for the first time in ages. Later, another message came in from Rachel. Rachel, sorry for snapping. I know you needed a break. I wish I didn't always have to do this alone. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong, but neither was I. So here I am, asking you, Internet, AITA? We didn't know it would be the wrong button until the TV screen went black, and a distorted digital voice asked, Do you wish to enter? I stared at the remote in my hand, then back at Noah, who was sprawled out on the couch with a slice of pizza halfway to his mouth. Did I break the TV? Noah squinted at the screen. Maybe, or maybe you unlocked some secret feature. Should I call tech support, or are we about to star in a found-footage horror movie? It's not my fault, I said, pointing to the remote like it was Exhibit A. It doesn't even have a button for. The voice interrupted, more insistent this time. Do you wish to enter? Yes or no? Noah and I exchanged a look. The pizza slice drooped precariously in his hand. Is this like a VR thing? Did your dad upgrade the TV without telling us? I don't think so, I said. My dad was the kind of person who thought a DVR was witchcraft, so the idea of him installing some advanced AI system seemed laughable. Still, the voice didn't feel like a glitch. It felt aware. Fine, Noah said, licking pizza grease off his thumb. Let's play along. Hit yes. What's the worst that could happen? I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed the arrow button until yes was highlighted and hit OK. The screen flickered, then filled with a swirling blue vortex that looked like a low-budget time travel effect from an old sci-fi show. Oh, great, Noah muttered. We've unlocked the Netflix multiverse. Shoo, I hissed. Let's see where this goes. The vortex faded, and suddenly, we weren't looking at our streaming menu anymore. Instead, there were two figures on the screen. A man in a trench coat standing under a flickering streetlight and a woman wearing a sparkling ball gown, holding what looked like a sword made of cotton candy. Both of them turned toward the camera, as if they could see us. "You've chosen to enter," the man said, his voice gravelly and dramatic. "Welcome to the showdown." "The what?" I asked, before remembering they couldn't hear me. The woman in the ball gown stepped forward, her cotton candy sword dripping pink sugar onto the pavement. "The showdown," she repeated, her voice much brighter. "A battle of genres. The ultimate clash of cinematic styles." Noah sat up straighter, intrigued. "Wait, are they fighting for us?" The man tipped his hat, shadows obscuring half his face. "We represent your choices, your preferences. Your inability to compromise has summoned us to decide once and for all which genre will dominate your queue." "What the hell?" I whispered. This was either the coolest Easter egg in TV history, or someone had slipped mushrooms onto our pizza. The woman twirled her sword like a baton. "I am Romancia, queen of comedy and romance. My realm sparkles with laughter, love, and lightness. And you," she said, pointing her sword at me, "need more joy in your life." The man stepped out of the shadows, revealing a face as weathered as his trench coat. "And I," he growled, "am Noir. I bring the thrill, the mystery, the raw, unflinching truths of existence." "Why does he sound like Batman?" Noah whispered. "Quiet," Noir barked, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The showdown begins now. 2 genres enter. 1 genre leaves. And you 2-inch," he pointed directly at us, "must choose." Romancia gave an exaggerated sigh. "Honestly, Noir, do you have to be so dramatic? It's just TV." "It's never just TV," Noir shot back. "It's storytelling. It's art. It's life distilled to its essence." Romancia rolled her eyes. "Life isn't all doom and gloom, you know. Sometimes it's cotton candy and sparkles. Right, Emma?" She winked at me through the screen. I blinked. How does she know my name?" Noah leaned forward. "Okay, but what are the stakes here? What happens if we don't choose?" Romancia's cheerful expression darkened. "If you don't choose, the vortex will collapse, and your algorithm will be doomed to eternal mediocrity." Noir nodded gravely. "You'll never find anything worth watching again." Noah groaned. "That's already my life. Just scrolling and scrolling." I smacked his arm. "Focus. We have to pick." Romancia stepped closer, her sword shimmering. "Think about it, Emma. Think about how good it feels to laugh after a hard day. To root for people who fall in love despite impossible odds. Don't you want to feel happy?" Noir countered, his silhouette sharp against the streetlight. "Or do you want substance? Depth? Stories that stay with you long after the credits roll? Emma, you know there's more to life than fluff." They both stared at us, waiting. The room felt heavy. The air charged like a thunderstorm was about to break. Noah turned to me, his expression unusually serious. "Well," he asked, "what do we do?" I looked at the screen, then back at him. Romancia's words echoed in my head. "Don't you want to feel happy?" But Noir's argument tugged at something deeper. The desire for meaning, for something that resonated. I said slowly, "I think we're asking the wrong question." Noah frowned. "What do you mean?" "Why should we have to choose?" I said, standing up. "Why can't we have both? Joy and depth? Cotton candy and meaning?" Romancia and Noir exchanged a look. For a moment, I thought they might argue. But then Romancia laughed. A light, musical sound that seemed to fill the room. "Well, Noir," she said, spinning her sword one last time. "Looks like they've outsmarted us." Noir grunted, his expression unreadable. For now, the screen flickered, the vortex reappeared, and then our regular streaming menu was back. The room felt oddly quiet, as if the confrontation had been some kind of fever dream. "So, what just happened?" Noah asked, his voice tentative. "I have no idea," I admitted, sinking back onto the couch. "But maybe we try mixing it up more?" He grinned. "Deal. You pick first." I scrolled through the options until I landed on a quirky romantic mystery called Love in the Shadows. It wasn't my usual thing, but maybe that was the point. As the opening credits rolled, I glanced at Noah, who was already reaching for another slice of pizza. Maybe the best stories were the ones that didn't fit neatly into a box. It all started with a group chat about a wedding gift. My friend Harper was getting married, and everyone wanted to chip in for something meaningful. You know, the kind of gift that makes people tear up when they open it, but also practical enough that it doesn't gather dust in a closet. Let's do a honeymoon fund, Sarah suggested, which was immediately shot down by Greg, who called it lazy. Then Lisa proposed a custom painting of Harper and her fiancé, but Sarah said that was weirdly narcissistic. The debate dragged on until I stepped in with the perfect idea: a high-end espresso machine. Harper was a coffee fiend, always raving about some overpriced latte she discovered. It was practical, indulgent, and something she'd never splurge on herself. Everyone loved the idea. Finally, consensus. I even found the exact model she'd love. Sleek, modern, and a little over $800. We can split it evenly, I said. $100 each from the 8 of us. I'll order it and handle the card. It all went smoothly at first. Everyone Venmo'd me their share within a couple of days, except for Greg. Classic Greg. He's the kind of guy who insists on ordering the cheapest beer at a bar but still mysteriously forgets his wallet half the time. When I reminded him, he said, "Oh yeah, I'll send it tomorrow." Tomorrow came and went. The espresso machine arrived, and Harper's wedding was fast approaching. I sent another nudge. "Hey, Greg, just checking in. Can you send the $100 for the gift?" He replied with a gif of a cat shrugging. No words, just the shrugging cat. I could feel my blood pressure spike, but I didn't want to start a fight, so I texted back, "Let me know if there's an issue. We're all chipping in evenly, so I want to make sure it's fair." Greg replied with, "LOL, I'm a little tight this month. Can I get you back later?" Now, let me paint a picture of Greg's version of tight. This is the same man who posts Instagram stories from concerts every weekend, eats at Michelin star restaurants for the experience, and recently upgraded to the newest iPhone. Meanwhile, I'd been budgeting my meals and skipping nights out just to afford my share of this wedding gift. "No problem," I texted, but what I wanted to say was, if you can afford a $20 cocktail, you can afford this. The wedding came and went. Harper cried when she unwrapped the espresso machine and hugged me, calling me the best friend ever. Everyone else at the table clapped, acting like they'd all personally delivered her firstborn child. Greg was the loudest. "What a perfect gift," he said, grinning at me. I smiled back, but inside, I was fuming. He hadn't paid me, and I knew he wasn't planning to. So, I did what any rational adult would do. I adjusted the math. I divided his unpaid $100 evenly among the rest of us, reducing his share to 0. Then I added an extra $25 to Greg's name on the card, making it look like he'd contributed more than anyone else. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Oh, absolutely. The aftermath was interesting. A week later, Greg texted me out of the blue. "Harper loved the machine. Thanks for handling it." No mention of the money. Nothing. So I replied, "You're welcome, and thanks for your $125 contribution." It really made the gift special. Greg didn't respond right away. When he finally did, it was just, "Wait, $125? Yep, I texted back, playing dumb. Everyone else chipped in $125 to cover the full cost. I figured you were okay with it since you never sent your $100. Cue the panic. No, I didn't agree to that. I said I was tight this month. You should have just split it normally. Oh, I replied, but we all thought you wanted to give a little extra since you didn't say anything at the time. Everyone was so impressed. Greg flipped. He started calling me, leaving long-winded voicemails about how unfair it was and how I'd screwed him over. Meanwhile, I sent screenshots of our text to the group chat, explaining the situation. Sarah immediately sided with me. If Greg didn't pay his share, it's his fault. You handled it fairly. Lisa was less enthusiastic. I get why you're mad, but wasn't adding $25 to his name kind of manipulative? Maybe, I said, but do you think he'd care if it had been one of us stuck paying extra? Greg must have found out about the group chat because he stormed into work the next day, glaring at me like I'd personally set his car on fire. "You made me look bad," he hissed as we passed in the hallway. "You made yourself look bad," I shot back. I just made sure it was accurate. Now, the group is split. Half of them think I'm a hero for standing up to Greg's freeloading ways. The other half thinks I overstepped by dragging him in the group chat and making him look generous. And Greg? He's still posting his fancy dinners on Instagram, but now he's blocked me from viewing his stories. So, AITA? When I got the text from my old high school friend Dan, my first reaction was confusion. Dan and I hadn't been close since graduation, and even then, our friendship had been more about convenience than compatibility. He had a car, I had math notes, and we both hated gym class. Since then, his life had taken a series of experimental turns. Last I heard, he was trying to make a living as a freelance cryptocurrency guru, whatever that meant, but his text was uncharacteristically straightforward. Hey, need a place to crash for a few weeks? You're the only one I trust. Can we talk? Against my better judgment, I replied, sure, what's going on? The phone call that followed was a symphony of half-explained disasters. There was something about a bad investment, a roommate who'd pawned his laptop, and a totally temporary lack of funds. He just needed a place to regroup. You're solid, man, he said. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you'd understand. By the end of the call, I'd reluctantly agreed. He was arriving the next day. Dan showed up at my door with a backpack, a guitar case, and a cardboard box full of wires and random electronic parts. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Scruffy, lanky, and wearing a hoodie that proclaimed HODL the line. This place is great, he said, stepping inside and immediately kicking off his shoes, one of which had a hole in the toe. Super zen vibes. Thanks, I said, already questioning my life choices. At first, Dan was the picture of gratitude. He slept on the couch, made himself scarce during the day, and even brought back groceries once, though most of them were just ramen and off-brand energy drinks. Fuel for the grind, he said with a wink, tapping the side of his head like he was a tech billionaire in disguise. The grind, as it turned out, involved hours of Dan hunched over my kitchen table, tinkering with wires and muttering about blockchain ecosystems. He claimed he was working on a revolutionary app that would disrupt the gig economy. The specifics were always vague, but he insisted it was going to make us both rich. Us? I asked one evening, as he sketched incomprehensible diagrams on a napkin. Yeah, man, he said, beaming. You're my guy. Once this takes off, you'll be swimming in crypto. Early investors get the biggest slice. I'm not investing, I said flatly. Not yet, he replied undeterred. By the end of week 1, Dan's super zen vibes had morphed into chaos. My apartment was strewn with charging cables, crumpled fast food wrappers, and what appeared to be the disassembled remains of my old DVD player. He'd taken over my desk, my coffee table, and half the kitchen counter, claiming he needed space to innovate. I think I've cracked it, he announced one night, holding up a circuit board like it was the Holy Grail. This baby is going to decentralize ride-sharing. How? I asked, mostly out of morbid curiosity. Can't tell you. NDA, he said, tapping his nose conspiratorially. But the turning point wasn't the clutter or the cryptic projects. It was the chicken. One afternoon, I came home to find Dan in the living room, holding a live chicken. Not a package of chicken. A live chicken. It clucked indignantly as he stroked its feathers like a cartoon villain. What the hell is that? I demanded. Her name's Ethereum, he said. I got her for an experiment. An experiment in what? Poultry farming? No, he said, as if I was the one being ridiculous. She's part of my pitch for the app. It's all about sustainability, man. People love that stuff. I stared at him, waiting for him to explain how a chicken tied into blockchain technology. He didn't. Instead, he asked if I had any birdseed. Dan, I said, pinching the bridge of my nose, you can't keep a chicken here. This is not a farm. It's temporary, he said, the same way you'd say it's fine about a splinter that's turning into gangrene. By week 3, I was at my breaking point. Dan was still jobless, his revolutionary app was nowhere near functional, and Ethereum had developed a habit of perching on my couch and glaring at me like I was the intruder. The final straw came when I found Dan installing a second router without asking. It's for bandwidth, he said casually, as if adding hardware to someone's internet wasn't wildly invasive. The blockchain eats a lot of data. Dan, I said, my voice tight with frustration, you need to leave. This isn't working. What do you mean? He asked, genuinely baffled. I mean, you've turned my apartment into a tech junkyard. You've contributed nothing but chaos, and you brought a freaking chicken into my home. I can't do this anymore. Dan looked at me like I just slapped him. Wow, he said, shaking his head. I thought you believed in me. This is what's wrong with people. Nobody wants to take risks anymore. Everyone's so small-minded. It's not small-minded to want my home back, I snapped. Take Ethereum and go. The next day, they were gone. I found a thank you note taped to the fridge, along with a USB drive labeled Future Riches. I haven't plugged it in. A week later, I saw a post on Dan's Twitter. A selfie with Ethereum in front of a van, captioned, "Some people just don't get it. The grind continues. #disruption, #innovation. AITA,